Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips joined by Justin Rowland from CatsIllustrated.com. Justin covers Kentucky, and he will bring us the Kentucky perspective today going into this weekend's ball game, 7:30 kick at Williams-Brice. Both teams are 2-0. Justin, welcome in today. Glad to have you.
I enjoyed joining you last year. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, good to have you back again this year. And, an interesting start to the year for both teams. I don't think a lot of folks expected South Carolina to be 2-0. Certainly folks did expect Kentucky to be 2-0, but it seems like the two teams have arrived at those same records in different routes. Justin, Kentucky has not been overly impressive from what I understand in their two wins over Southern Miss and Eastern Kentucky.
Well, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I think the offense has definitely not hit on all cylinders the way that some people hoped that it would. The offensive line was thought to be a strength going into the season, and they lost John Toth, a 4-year starter at center. They had an injury before the season to starting left tackle Cole Mosier. They've had a couple of guys banged up in the first couple of games, so they've got some moving parts, and they're not quite as deep up front as last year. They also dealt with some center exchange issues that kind of thwarted the offense in the first couple of games, but they're still hoping the running game can be a strength in the long term, and they did get running better against Eastern Kentucky in the second half. Stephen Johnson looks a little bit better at quarterback, but the receivers are a question mark. Defensively, I don't think people are as concerned. The secondary was thought to be the strength of defense going into the season, but it's actually been the front seven and the defensive line that's kind of been playing over its head for the first couple of games here. So I don't think we really know what to expect going forward, but it hasn't been the kind of team we expected to see.
Interesting that Kentucky's run defense has been much improved this year, Justin. Third in the SEC in rushing right now, and only about 2 yards a carry through 2 games.
Yeah, and if anybody who knows anything about Kentucky football knows that their biggest problem historically has been stopping the run. It's tough to recruit great defensive linemen anywhere, but especially if you're trying to climb the SEC ladder. A lot of people are going to look at that and say, well, they played Southern Miss and Eastern Kentucky. Well, last year, Southern Miss ran 68 times for like 270 yards against them. This year, they held Ito Smith, a really good running back, and that whole Southern Miss backfield to 55 yards on 33 carries. They don't have a lot of experience up front on the defensive line, but they've got more SEC caliber athletes and a deeper core of SEC caliber athletes on the defensive line, and they have a really experienced athletic linebacking core that sets the edge and plays the edge better than they've had in the past.
Justin, Kentucky struggled against Eastern Kentucky last Saturday, trailing in the fourth quarter, but the Wildcats got their running game going and pulled away to win that game.
Yeah, and I would say that it was Stephen Johnson, the quarterback, really getting the passing game to spread the field and forcing Eastern Kentucky out of the box that opened things up for Benny Snell. We've come to find out that Benny Snell, 1,100 yards, 13 touchdowns last year, has been dealing with some rib issues, and his status has been a little bit uncertain. We don't know if he's going to be 100% for the South Carolina game, but my guess is he'll go. He get a lot of carries. They did lean more heavily on Snell in the second half, and that was their identity last year. Last year, it was the first time in program history they had 2 running backs with 1,000 yards, and Benny Snell has to have big games for this Kentucky offense to reach its potential.
Okay, how banged up, how healthy is this Kentucky team? Star linebacker Jordan Jones, with an injury question that cropped up in last week's game, and Benny Snell, you mentioned the rib problem there. Are either or both of these guys going to be available to play on Saturday?
Yeah, that's the question. If I had to guess, I would say Snell is going to be good to go. He's a workhorse. He's a competitor. He's got a great competitive edge. I would be shocked if he didn't go just because of how important he is and his personality. As for Jordan Jones, he's kind of the same way. I mean, he's always going 110 miles an hour like he's shot out of a cannon. He must be really, really feeling less than 100% for there to be any concern about him. And there seems to be with a shoulder issue that the coaching staff hasn't said a whole lot about when he'll be ready or what his readiness is going to be. He's an all-SEC player. The SEC's returning leading tackler this year. And I mentioned Mosier, the left tackle they lost before the season. He's out. And also starting wide receiver Dorian Baker, they lost before the season as well. So injuries have this team, or not the team, and they got the fan base feeling like they're kind of snake bit.
Justin Rowland, our guest from CatsIllustrated.com. Justin, I was looking at some of your work today on your website, and I thought it was interesting that you mentioned Lynn Bowden, a 4-star prospect. He could be a factor this week. Is he expected to play? What kind of player is he? Tell us about him.
Well, he's a true freshman. The first game, he didn't play much, and there was kind of a dust-up on Twitter. He wasn't happy about not playing, but that seems to be worked out. They were going to play him a lot against Eastern Kentucky, but he got ejected for a targeting call that was pretty controversial. And that was early in the game. But he's a 4-star recruit, but that only tells part of the story. Like, people around the Youngstown, Ohio area thought that this was one of the best football players to come out of Youngstown in a really, really long time. He was a quarterback in high school. He's got some Randall Cobb-like qualities if South Carolina remembers him. in terms of his vision, his balance, his competitiveness, his ability to accelerate. And I wouldn't be shocked if South Carolina fans see him on returns in the slot. And I think he's also going to get some time in the Wildcat. The Wildcat formation has struggled this year, but if they put Bowden back there like they expect to, or like we expect him to, then you introduce the threat of the pass, and he could be a threat to pass the ball from that formation.
You point out on CatsIllustrated.com that the Wildcat might be the number one reason that Kentucky has beaten South Carolina 3 years running. 3 years in a row, Kentucky has run for over 200 yards against the Gamecocks, and I got to believe Kentucky's planning to run the football again on Saturday.
I think it has to be. I think they feel confident with Steven Johnson at quarterback. This is his second year as a starter, and he doesn't have the most arm talent in the world, but he's a gamer. He outdueled Lamar Jackson on the road in a win at Louisville last year. But this is a team that's identity needs to be power football, and the offensive line issues have made that a problem early in the season. But in terms of their personnel, the strengths of the team on paper being the line, the tight ends, the running backs, this is a team that's still going to run to set up the pass, go to the tight ends and the outside receivers on play action more than they're going to pass to set up the run. So, yeah, they'll need to run the ball game. But the Wildcat formation has been a problem this year. It's been very good at Kentucky for 3 years running, but I think they might have like net negative yards through 2 games from the Wildcat formation. So they need to get that figured out.
Gamecock Central Radio, Emerson Phillips with Justin Rowland from CatsIllustrated.com. We invite you to download the Gamecock Central Radio app that's available on the App Store and on Google Play. Subscribe to our podcast. Search for Gamecock Central Radio on iTunes, SoundCloud, and other popular services, or just visit radio.GamecockCentral.com. And we invite you to take advantage of the Gamecock Central hotline. We got this new phone number set up. You can call in, leave us a voicemail, and Wes Mitchell will answer your questions on Gamecock football on a future edition of Gamecock Central Radio. The number is 803-497-9058. It's 803-497-9058. Call the Gamecock Central hotline. Leave us a message, and we'll play the recording of your voice on a future edition of Gamecock Central Radio. Justin, Kentucky beat Southern Miss in the opener, and I know you feel like the Southern Miss offense was pretty good, maybe better than South Carolina's.
Well, I think that's tough to call. There was a quarterback controversy for Southern Miss going into the season. I think there's definitely a step down in quarterback play at Southern Miss going from Nick Mullins. There was Keon Howard and Quadric Briggs. They saw Keon Howard in the first half, and they played him really well. They stuffed the run all game, but when they put Briggs in at quarterback in the second half, they did ultimately pass for more than 300 yards against Kentucky's secondary. So if people are wondering what kind of secondary Kentucky's really going to have this year, but yeah, you go on the road at Southern Miss, a team that scored 44 points on you in Lexington last year, to hold them to 17 and really control that game for the most part. They felt really good about the defensive effort in that first week.
Justin, talk about special teams. Obviously, the Gamecocks have been lights out through the first 2 weeks. You know what? And it hasn't just been Debo Samuel on kickoff returns, even though he is two-time SEC Special Teams Player of the Week with kickoff return TDs in the first 2 ball games of the year. You know, the Gamecocks blocked a field goal last week. They forced a fumble in punt coverage. They had a 73-yard punt. South Carolina special teams are as good through 2 weeks maybe as they've ever been. So talk about what a concern that is for Kentucky, and talk about Kentucky special teams.
Well, it's a huge concern. Mark Stoops was on the Paul Feinbaum show this week, and Feinbaum asked him, about Debo Samuel, and Stoops said, I'm not going to tip my hand, but he kind of implied that they're aware of what he's doing back there, and I would be surprised if they gave him too many opportunities. And so they'll try to avoid him, and that can have an impact on the game as well. Kentucky played really well on special teams in the opener against Southern Miss. So one of the best special teams performances they've had in years. But then they took a step back against Eastern Kentucky. They gave up a couple of big returns, which is a big red flag. They missed the field goal. They hit a couple, but they missed the field goal. And, just the execution wasn't down. I've heard this week in practice the kicker, Austin McGinnis, who is the best kicker in Kentucky history, has worked on his footwork on those kickoffs. He had some hang time issues that led to those returns last week, and so it's been a big focus, and they know that that's the key to the game.
Is there any chance that Kentucky kicks to Debo Samuel at any point in the game this week?
If they do, I think the guy who pulls back Mark Stoops on the sidelines might have to pull him back really hard, because I would be surprised based on what Kentucky's issues were last week and what Samuel has done. I mean, that would be a big no-no, and we would really see what kind of coverage they've got. They haven't allowed a kickoff return for a touchdown in 19 consecutive games, and they used to be really bad about that. So they've improved there, but last week, I think that probably ended the discussion. They're probably not going to kick it.
Justin, Kentucky is a much improved program, 9-3 over their last 12 ball games, and this is a Kentucky football team that really has been a thorn in the Gamecocks' side. losing 3 straight, to Kentucky. And Carolina's got a lot of momentum coming into this game with a couple of wins away from home against Power 5 schools. Certainly not world beaters, NC State and Missouri, but 2 pretty good teams that South Carolina feels good about itself right now, having won these 2 ball games. So I feel like South Carolina has got a little bit of a fire under their rear end, for lack of a better way of putting it, for Kentucky. And we expect the joint to be packed on Saturday night. Williams-Brice really should be rocking. The university has made it a blackout game. Fans are being encouraged to wear black to the football game. So it feels like this Kentucky game has taken on added significance for South Carolina. How do the Kentucky Wildcats feel about this one?
Well, I think they feel like their personnel is pretty even with South Carolina. If you look at the recruiting rankings for these teams over the last 5 years, it's really not that different. And you can't say that too many times in history, recent history or further back especially. They feel good about the personnel. They feel good about having a constant presence and a leader back there at quarterback. But you worry about the offensive line issue. This is a team that really needs to be able to lean on the running game. The offensive line needs to play its best game of the year, better than they play the first 2 weeks to have a chance in Williams-Brice Stadium. And certainly the injuries are a concern. I think Kentucky fans realize this is going to be a really tough game because fans are going to be welcoming home a 2-0 team that hasn't played a home game this year. They know what it means a lot to South Carolina. If Carolina wins this game, they're set up with a pretty high floor in the final standing. So it's an important game for Kentucky as well. And I think this is a program with more confidence to go on the road. They went on the road and beat Louisville last year. They played better at Tennessee, so they've been a better road team recently, and I know they're confident as well.
All right, Kentucky's SEC opener Saturday night at Williams-Brice. Gamecocks trying to improve to 2-0 in the league. Justin Rowland from CatsIllustrated.com bringing us the Kentucky perspective. Justin, thanks very much for your time and your insight.
Thanks a lot.
All right, we'll come back here on Gamecock Central Radio. We got plenty more Kentucky coverage to come this week, and we got our game day podcast coming up. Call the Gamecock Central hotline. We'll get you involved with that. For Justin Rowland, I'm Emerson Phillips. Thanks for being with us.